Welcome to Badge Banter, where we feature some awesome stories from some of our great partners about the importance of the ID badge as the foundation of an organization's overall security. I am Lindsay Martin-Nez from Badge Pass, and I'm really excited to introduce you to today's special guest, Jon Harris from HiveWatch, and also the host of the Next Level podcast, which I was a guest on earlier this year. Thank you for being here, Jon.
Excited to be here, Lindsay. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Before we dive into your story today, can you give us a brief history of your time working in the industry, kind of where you've been previously and what you're doing now with HiveWatch?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the industry for almost 20 years. My first role way back when was a security officer at a university where I worked on the third shift and carried a key ring with almost 80 keys, spending all my time unlocking doors and then relocking doors over the 8-hour shift. Fast forward, maybe the next 10 years, I navigated my way through the end user side, working at a large computer company, and then spending most of it in aerospace and defense, where I was the head of security and compliance for a large global aerospace and defense company, building out their security programs, access control, video, a global security operations center, and a lot of different things for them. After that, I switched over to the service provider side and spent some time with Linnell S2 as a business development professional, went into consulting with a large global consulting company, did some product consulting with technology companies directly in the industry, working on go-to-market strategies, market sizing, and different technology strategies as well. And then joined HiveWatch about 2 years ago, and I'm the head of ecosystem partnerships, working on channel marketing, go-to-market strategy, integration partnerships, and the like.
I would argue that you're not old enough to have this much experience in the industry, but that is impressive for sure. So I wanted you to share kind of your history because I think it helps bring perspective that you've had kind of a unique insight, not just from, like a software or manufacturer side or integrator side, but also an end user and user of different systems. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you go ahead and share your story? Obviously, we talk a lot about the importance of the physical ID badge and how that relates to an organization's overall security efforts. And so I'm sure you have multiple stories, but you've chosen just one for us today. So why don't you go ahead and share that?
Yeah, specifically, I like to discuss the importance of the badge and the physical credential as it pertains to that aerospace and defense experience that I had. So in the aerospace and defense industry, the badge is really seen as this emblem of seniority and programs you've been on, this physical identity that people have a lot of pride in. And I think that's what's most interesting. I mean, anytime you see somebody putting on LinkedIn when they're leaving a company, they show their badge. They go, look at this. Look how young I looked when I first had this photo, or whatever the case is, right? It's a pride thing. And so when I was with the aerospace company, it was the same way with the badge, So that's the first thing I want to point out. It's kind of this pride that has with this identity and being associated with a company and having their logo as a part of you. Also, the fact is that I worked with a lot of highly controlled, highly sensitive areas, special programs for government, and we weren't allowed to take any electronics into those areas. So we had to have a physical badge in order to authorize access into certain places and certain programs. We also set up a visual identification based on badge type. So if you were a visitor, if you were a non-US visitor, or if we were in Europe, if you were a non-local, you had a different color badge, and we color coordinated our facility so that visual identification could quickly see whether or not that person belonged where they were. And that helped us keep our physical controls in place. And this was mandated by the contracts and the controls that we had with the different government entities that we worked with. And so we had to have this very complex, layered control plan in place. And it was a lot easier if we just said, red badge is only allowed in red area, green badges can go anywhere, and had that visual cue. And then lastly, we did a lot of large machine work in that we were building aerospace components, and some things on large jets were massive. And we couldn't have phones and electronics out in certain areas. And so a lot of times we'd have, and we wouldn't have lanyards around the neck per se, but they could wear badges on their arms. It was still visible. So we did a lot of work with our folks to make sure anyone could use a badge. Everyone felt welcomed. They had their identity. they could get where they wanted to get, and then had that visual control that was necessary to ensure that folks who weren't authorized in certain places could be identified quickly and remediated.
That's awesome. We've had other guests talk about, using the badge as kind of like a stepping stone to do other things within an organization. But I think that this angle and talking about it as it's kind of how, people feel like included or part of a community. It's something that I think that people take for granted. I was just in a meeting with the school district earlier this morning, actually, and they had so many questions about designing the badge specifically. We went on this huge tangent that I almost take for granted now because I'm in it and I talk about it so often, but they were like, well, can we do this? And can we have this for, different types of people? And what about changing the colors? And there's so many things you can do where people just feel like I identify with this. I'm a part of this community, and wearing that physically, it's a source of pride that you certainly lose if you don't have the badge in place.
Absolutely. And even thinking about like back in college, when I come across my university badge and I'm like, oh yeah, remember, like, it's a memory. It's something that I take pride in. And going back to the aerospace example, again, they're like, we had teams who built product that went on NASA shuttle missions, and they'd get a little logo on their badge that said, I was on that program, I'm a part of that mission. And that becomes something that's a source of pride for them, and something that rewards them for the different things that they're a part of. And so I think, that can't be understated. Yes, there's the component of like, convenience of certain other types of credentials, and those have a place. And I think that certain places are quick to adopt those, and it's fine. And I don't think it's a zero-sum game, and you can't throw out all the value and benefit and requirements that I've just expressed. Like, I find it very challenging. Not like I couldn't have done my job to the extent that I needed to and implement all the controls and programs that I did without having this simple badge, this simple, piece of plastic, because sometimes it's not even an access card. It's a physical badge that's just showing the identity, and having that all as a cooperative program pulled together, and having that visual cue there, means a lot to different people.
It definitely does. And I know you and I could go down this rabbit trail all day and have this, debate of physical badge versus other types of credentials. And we did actually talk about it briefly. So if you haven't heard the podcast that I was on with Jon earlier this year, I would encourage you to listen to it. But the debate in our industry specifically is always around mobile versus physical. And to your point, what you were just saying, I don't think that it's one or the other. I think that there's benefits to the physical badge that can't be understated. They're super important, and I don't think those are going away anytime soon, not to mention instances like you talked about where you can't even take a mobile device, so that's not even practical. But I think there's some huge convenience and user experience things to take into account when you consider the mobile credential as well. So I think they can complement each other, and really be a combined effort, as opposed to it's got to be all in one or all in the other. It's not really an if or for me. They can be both.
Exactly. And I think that's a great way to look at all the technologies that we tend to evaluate in the security industry. Rarely is it a all this way or all that way. It's some combination thereof, and it has to be flexible enough to fulfill the needs of the end user, and what works for them, and not trying to shove a specific technology that we may prefer down their throat because maybe it gives us a better revenue stream, or it's a better business model for us. Customer-centric focus when you're providing security solutions, I think, is key.
No, that's a great point and an excellent way for us to wrap this up. So thank you so much for visiting with me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yep, appreciate your time. And please, I hope you join us next time as we take you beyond the badge.